Remember gathering around the TV, the familiar theme song playing, and a family that always made us smile? Those were simpler times, and the Bradys were a big part of it. Robert Reed as Mike Brady, the Shakespearean soul trapped in a sitcom father. Born in Highland Park, Illinois in 1932, Robert Reed was far more than the architect with the perm we welcomed into our living rooms every Friday night. Before he donned the plaid suits of Mike Brady at age 37, Reed was a classically trained thespian honing his craft at the prestigious Royal Academy of Dramatic Art in London. He yearned for the gravitas of Shakespeare, yet fate cast him as the ultimate American father figure in the Brady Bunch. To the world, he was the definition of stability, a warm, thoughtful voice of reason who could solve any crisis within a 30-minute episode. With a commanding presence and a signature smile, he provided a sense of order during the chaotic cultural shifts of the late 60s and early 70s. He was the dad everyone wished they had, offering wisdom that felt incredibly real, even if the grass in the backyard was fake. However, behind the laughter and the perfectly scripted morals lay a deep, silent pain. Reed lived a double life that tore him apart emotionally. A serious actor trapped in what he considered a frivolous show, he often battled with the producers demanding logic in scripts that were meant to be silly, a struggle born from his intense professional pride. But the far darker shadow was his lonely reality as a closeted gay man in an era that offered no mercy or understanding. He was forced to hide his true self to maintain his image as America's patriarch, a repression that created an immense emotional strain. The father who taught us honesty was compelled to live a lie. His final years were marked by a heartbreaking secret. He contracted HIV, a diagnosis that at the time carried unspeakable social stigma. He faced this terrifying illness largely in solitude, fearing the destruction of his legacy, carrying the weight of a quiet tragedy that no sitcom plot could ever resolve. Robert Reed quietly disappeared from this world on May 12, 1992 at the age of 59, just days before the Brady Bunch was set for yet another reunion. His death certificate cited colon cancer, but it was the underlying contribution of HIV that shocked the nation and peeled back the curtain on his private grief. Today, in late 2025, over 3 decades since his passing, the bitterness of his struggles has faded, leaving only the warmth of his performance. We no longer see just a sitcom dad. We see a man of fragile strength who gave his heart to a role he resented purely for the children he worked with. His diadem is no longer just fame, but dignity. He remains an eternal emotional anchor for a generation, reminding us that sometimes the people who provide the most light are the ones standing in the deepest shadow. Florence Henderson, as Carol Brady, the mother with a broken past who healed a nation. Born on Valentine's Day, February 14, 1934, in the humble town of Dale, Indiana. Florence Henderson was destined to be America's sweetheart. When she first appeared as the matriarch Carol Brady at the age of 35, she brought a unique blend of modern assertiveness and traditional warmth that was rare for TV mothers of the time. A veteran of the Broadway stage, she possessed a radiant presence and a singing voice that could fill a room with joy. She was the lovely lady who made blending 2 families look effortless. Her signature smile and optimistic spirit convinced a generation that love could solve any domestic crisis. She was the soft place to land for viewers, navigating a changing world, the mother figure who was always there, always listening, and always kind, a beacon of stability in the American living room. Yet the woman who played America's perfect mother grew up without one. Florence endured a childhood of crushing poverty, the youngest of 10 children raised by a tobacco sharecropper father who battled severe alcoholism. Her own mother left the family when Florence was just 12, leaving a void of abandonment that she spent a lifetime trying to fill with love for others. This cheerful icon carried the scars of a lonely reality. Furthermore, during her rise to fame, she faced a terrifying silent threat, a hereditary condition called otosclerosis. She began losing her hearing in the 1950s, a devastating blow for a singer and actress. She lived in constant fear that this invisible disability would end her career, forcing her to memorize lip movements just to keep up. The matriarch, who listened to everyone's problems, was secretly terrified of a world fading into silence, masking her physical and emotional strain with that famous, unshakable smile. Ann B. Davis as Alice Nelson, the lonely guardian of the American home. Born on May 5, 1926, in Schenectady, New York. Ann B. Davis was already a respected Emmy-winning actress before she donned the iconic blue uniform of Alice Nelson at the age of 43. To the world, she was the wisecracking housekeeper who kept the chaotic Brady household running with a raspy voice and a heart of gold. She was the third parent, the comic relief with a sensible soul who offered sage advice over chopping carrots. With her self-deprecating humor and unshakable loyalty, she became the trustworthy aunt figure for millions of viewers. While the kids grew up and the parents lectured, Alice was the constant, the sturdy pillar in the kitchen who made sure everyone was fed warm and loved. She was the dependable warmth in the background, indispensable and timeless. Behind the booming laugh and the slapstick comedy, however, lay a life of stark contrast to the bustling family she served on screen. While Alice eventually found love with Sam the Butcher, Ann lived a life of quiet, emotional solitude. She never married, never had the loud, messy family she helped raise on television night after night. For decades, she was trapped by the very uniform that made her famous. The industry saw only the housekeeper, forcing her into a professional box that stifled her dramatic potential. She eventually withdrew from Hollywood's glare, seeking solace in a religious community, living a near-monastic life to fill the emotional void left by the superficiality of fame. The final curtain fell with shocking abruptness. In a tragic twist of fate, this sturdy woman suffered a fall in her bathroom, leading to a subdural hematoma. She never woke up. The woman who spent a lifetime catching others when they fell had no one to catch her in that final lonely moment. Ann B. Davis passed away on June 1, 2014 at the age of 88. As we look back from the perspective of 2025, her absence feels like a home without a hearth. She didn't leave behind a scandalous fortune, but rather a legacy of humility and service. She donated much of her time and earnings to her church, living with an ascetic discipline that baffled the luxury of Hollywood. Her resting place is modest, much like the character she played, yet her impact is monumental. She taught us that family isn't just about blood. It's about the people who show up every day. She remains the keeper of the house, in our collective memory, forever loyal and forever missed. Allan Melvin as Sam Franklin, the butcher who carried a quiet dignity in the shadows. Born on February 18, 1923 in Kansas City, Allan Melvin was a man of 1,000 faces and voices before he ever put on the apron of Sam the Butcher at the age of 46. With a face etched with character and a voice that could command a room, he was the quintessential working man of classic television. To the audience, Sam was the jovial, bowling-loving boyfriend of Alice, bringing a touch of blue-collar reality to the pristine Brady suburbs. He was the reliable comic relief, the man with the sturdy smile who promised simple happiness in the form of a meat delivery. He represented the grounded, earthy warmth that the show sometimes lacked, a scene-stealing presence who made us believe that love could bloom even over a butcher's counter. Yet Allan Melvin's career was a study in being everywhere, yet nowhere. He was the eternal guest star, the perennial sidekick, never the hero. While he brought laughter to millions, he lived with the professional frustration of being typecast as the tough guy or the goofball, his dramatic range largely ignored by an industry that refused to see past his broad grin. He was a master of voice acting, giving life to cartoons like Magilla Gorilla, but this success came with a heavy price: anonymity. He stood in the background of legends, watching others bask in the spotlight, while he remained a supporting player in his own life. There is a silent pain in being the person everyone recognizes, but no one truly knows a career defined by reliability rather than glory. He was the background character who worked tirelessly until the applause faded, carrying the quiet burden of an artist whose full potential was never quite unlocked by the cameras. Allan Melvin quietly departed on January 17, 2008, succumbing to cancer at the age of 84. Standing here in late 2025, his name is often forgotten by the casual viewer, but his face remains an indelible part of our nostalgic landscape. He didn't leave behind headlines or scandals, but rather a body of work that represents the backbone of 20th century television. He passed away with the dignity of a man who did his job well, even if the world didn't always offer him the front seat. He is the reminder of the unsung heroes, those who make the stars shine brighter while standing in the dark. Sherwood Schwartz, the creator who built a paradise while battling a war of respect. Born on November 14, 1916 in Passaic, New Jersey, Sherwood Schwartz was the mastermind who constructed the idealized world of the Brady Bunch. Already a seasoned writer at the age of 52 when the show premiered, he was the visionary who dared to put a blended family on television when such a concept was still taboo. He crafted a universe of sunshine, moral lessons, and happy endings, a promised land for children growing up in a turbulent America. He was the architect of our comfort, the man who believed fiercely that television should be a warm hug rather than a cold mirror. His imagination birthed a cultural phenomenon that has outlived nearly every critic who tried to tear it down. However, behind the technicolor joy he created, Schwartz endured a career defined by critical rejection and intellectual isolation. For decades, he was the punching bag of TV critics who labeled his work mindless and lowbrow. He suffered the deep despair of an artist whose massive commercial success was met with sneers from his peers. Even on his own set, he fought a bitter, silent war with Robert Reed Mike Brady, who constantly belittled Schwartz's writing as garbage. Imagine the emotional strain of creating a show about love and harmony while the people performing it held you in contempt. He carried the shame of being popular, but not respected a wound that festered for years. He was a man who wanted to preach unity, yet he often stood alone in the industry defending his creations against a world that called them foolish. His tragedy was the loneliness of the misunderstood populist. Sherwood Schwartz lived a long life, passing away peacefully on July 12, 2011, at the remarkable age of 94. Now, in 2025, history has finally vindicated him. The critics are long forgotten, but his creation endures as a sanctuary for the weary soul. He died knowing he was loved by the public, even if the industry was slow to bow. His legacy is a testament to persistence. He proved that kindness and simplicity have a staying power that cynicism can never touch. He built a house that never closes its doors, welcoming generation after generation into his warm, if imperfect, embrace. Hal Smith as Santa Claus, the gentle voice that hid a kingdom of sorrow. Born on August 24, 1916 in Petoskey, Michigan, Hal Smith was a magician of sound long before he donned the red suit of Santa Claus for the Brady Bunch at the age of 53. While the world knew him best as the town drunk Otis Campbell on the Andy Griffith Show, his appearance in the Brady household was a moment of pure, unadulterated warmth. He wasn't just playing a role. He was the embodiment of childhood hope, the man who cured Cindy Brady's tonsillitis blues with a wink and a promise. With a voice that could shift from a booming laugh to a comforting whisper, he possessed a grandfatherly grace that felt safe and eternal. He was the invisible friend to millions, the voice behind countless cartoons, a man whose vocal cords painted pictures more vivid than reality itself. But behind the jovial laughter lay a life of ironic contrast and deep personal loss. The man famous for playing a hapless drunk was in reality a disciplined teetotaler who despised alcohol, a double life forced upon him by typecasting that overshadowed his serious talents. He lived with the frustration of being the clown while possessing the soul of a dramatic actor. Yet his most profound heartbreak came late in life. After decades of a loving marriage, he lost his wife Louise in 1992. The silence she left behind was deafening. For a man whose life was built on sound and voices, the quiet of a lonely home was a torture no script could capture. He threw himself into work to escape the grief, taking on the voice of Winnie the Pooh, trying to fill the void with the innocence of the 100-acre wood, but his heart was irretrievably broken. He was a man giving joy to the world while his own world had turned gray and solitary. Hal Smith's heart finally gave out on January 28, 1994, when he passed away at the age of 77, seemingly from a massive heart attack while listening to a radio drama, A Poetic End for a Man of Sound. Now, in late 2025, his name has largely faded from the marquee, but his spirit is woven into the fabric of American childhood. He left no scandals, only a legacy of kindness and a library of voices that still echo in the reruns of our lives. He reminds us that the people who make us laugh the hardest are often the ones fighting the quietest battles against loneliness. Jack Collins as Mr. Phillips, the forgotten authority figure who faded into the static. Born on March 18, 1918 in the bustling streets of New York, Jack Collins was the quintessential face of authority. When he stepped into the shoes of Mr. Phillips, Mike Brady's stern yet reasonable boss at the age of 51, he represented the corporate stability of the American dream. With his sharp suits, commanding presence, and booming, resonant voice, he was the man who held the keys to the Brady family's financial future. He wasn't just a boss, he was the gatekeeper of the era, the symbol of the serious working world that existed outside the Brady's AstroTurf backyard. He played the role with a blustery charm, a man of importance who demanded respect merely by walking into a room. However, Jack Collins lived the tragedy of the familiar face. He was a brilliant character actor who appeared in nearly every major show of the 60s and 70s, yet he remained a stranger to the public. He suffered from the curse of the background, always the boss, the politician, the obstacle, but never the hero. There is a specific kind of professional loneliness in being indispensable to a plot, but disposable to the audience. He worked relentlessly, hopping from set to set, driven by the anxiety of a freelance life where the phone could stop ringing at any moment. He carried the emotional strain of an industry that saw him as a type rather than a human being. As he aged, the roles dried up, and the powerful, commanding figure we saw on screen was forced into a quiet, involuntary retirement, watching the industry he served move on without a backward glance. Jack Collins quietly departed this life on January 31, 2005, at the age of 86. Today, in 2025, over 20 years after his death, he stands as a monument to the working actor. He didn't die with millions in the bank or a star on the Walk of Fame, but he left behind a blueprint of reliability. His tragedy wasn't a dramatic explosion, but the slow fade of recognition, of fear every performer harbors. We honor him now not as a footnote, but as the sturdy foundation upon which the stars stood. He was the man in the suit who made the fantasy feel real, and for that he deserves our belated applause. Robbie Rist as Cousin Oliver, the innocent child blamed for the end of an era. Born on April 4, 1964 in Woodland Hills, California, Robbie Rist walked onto the set of The Brady Bunch at the tender age of 9, carrying the weight of a network's desperation on his small shoulders. With his John Denver-style glasses and mop of blonde hair, he was introduced in the show's final season as Cousin Oliver, a fresh spark intended to revitalize the aging series. To the producers, he was a cute, mischievous addition meant to bring back the youthful energy the older kids had outgrown. He was the bright-eyed boy with the Jinx label waiting in the wings, though he didn't know it yet. He played his part with the exuberant innocence of a child trying his best to fit into a family that the world already felt was complete without him. However, Robbie Rist became the victim of one of Hollywood's cruelest phenomena, the Cousin Oliver syndrome. Instead of being embraced, he became the scapegoat for the show's cancellation. Imagine the emotional confusion of a 9-year-old boy who is publicly labeled as the reason a beloved cultural institution died. He faced immediate rejection from an audience that saw him not as a child, but as an intruder, an annoying gimmick. This social stigma followed him for decades. He was branded a bad omen, a heavy cross to bear for a kid who just wanted to act. While the other Bradys were loved, Oliver was merely tolerated, or worse, mocked. He grew up in the shadow of this rejection, forced to navigate an industry that had preemptively decided he was unlucky, creating a deep, silent pain of never truly belonging to the family he was hired to save. Today, on November 25th, 2025, Robbie Rist is 61 years old. He has long since made peace with his chaotic entry into pop culture, reinventing himself as a successful musician and voice actor, most notably as the voice of Michelangelo in the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movies. He survived the curse with humor and grace, turning a childhood trauma into a badge of honor. While he was once the symbol of an ending, he is now a testament to resilience, proving that a child actor can outlive the harsh labels of the past and find a rhythm all his own. Barry Williams as Greg Brady, the golden boy trapped in a prism of perfection. Born on September 30th, 1954 in Santa Monica, California, Barry Williams was the teenage dream of the early 70s. Stepping into the role of the eldest son, Greg Brady, at the age of 14, he was the groovy, guitar-playing big brother every American kid looked up to. With his perm, his deep voice, and his serious man-of-the-house demeanor, he represented the perfect transition from boyhood to manhood. He was the leader of the pack, the reliable heartthrob who dated cheerleaders and wrote songs. On screen, Greg was cool, collected, and always morally upright, a polished idol who seemed to glide through adolescence without a single scratch, embodying the sunny optimism of the California dream. Yet the reality behind the golden boy image was a turbulent storm of identity crisis and emotional strain. Barry was a young man suffocating under the pressure to be perfect. He famously struggled to separate his own growing desires from the sterile script of the show. There were moments of shocking rebellion, such as filming scenes while under the influence of marijuana, trying to numb the crushing boredom and pressure of the set, a haunting moment where his glassy eyes betrayed a lost soul. He also navigated a confusing, unspoken attraction to his TV mother, Florence Henderson, a situation that highlighted his desperate search for connection in a bizarre, artificial world. After the show ended, the Greg Brady persona became a prison. He was typecast, ridiculed, and unable to be taken seriously as an adult actor. The fame he found came with a heavy price, the loss of his own name. He spent decades trying to escape the shadow of the perm, battling the deep despair of a career that peaked before he could even legally drink. As of November 25th, 2025, Barry Williams is 71 years old. He is the elder statesman of the Brady legacy, the dad of the surviving cast. He eventually stopped fighting the ghost of Greg Brady and embraced him, finding success in musical theater and reality TV, and even becoming a face of nostalgia in Branson, Missouri. He found a way to monetize the memories that once haunted him. His journey is one of acceptance, a lesson that sometimes to find peace, you must hug the very shadow that tried to swallow you whole. He remains our eternal big brother, graying now but still standing. Maureen McCormick as Marcia Brady, the perfect princess who walked through hell. Born on August 5th, 1956, in the sunny hills of Encino, California, Maureen McCormick was the undisputed queen of teen television. Cast as the eldest daughter, Marcia Brady, at the age of 13, she became the idealized vision of the American teenage girl. With her cascading blonde hair, radiant blue eyes, and perky demeanor, she was the girl every boy wanted to date and every girl wanted to be. Marcia became a cultural mantra of envy and admiration. She was the picture of confidence, the head cheerleader, the honor student who always landed on her feet. To the viewers, her life seemed like a fairy tale etched in celluloid, a world where beauty and grace were the only currencies that mattered. But beneath the polished veneer of perfect Marcia, Maureen was drowning in a sea of unspeakable tragedy and self-destruction. The pressure to maintain a flawless image while navigating a turbulent family life pushed her toward a devastating cliff. By her late teens, the princess had plunged into a deep despair fueled by severe cocaine and Quaalude addiction. She confessed to trading sex for drugs, a heartbreaking reality that stood in horrific contrast to her wholesome screen image. She battled bulimia, starving herself to fit the impossible standards of Hollywood, and lived in constant paranoid fear, once convinced she had contracted syphilis, a terror that consumed her mind. She even botched auditions for major films like Raiders of the Lost Ark because she was high watching her career crumble while trapped in a cycle of shame. The girl who had everything on screen felt she had absolutely nothing inside, living a double life of glamour and grime that nearly killed her. Today, on November 25th, 2025, Maureen McCormick is 69 years old. Her survival is nothing short of a miracle. She pulled herself back from the brink, finding sobriety and purpose through the love of her husband and faith. She bravely shattered the Marcia myth with her brutally honest memoir, turning her shame into a beacon of hope for others battling addiction. She is no longer the perfect doll on the shelf, but a warrior with scars, reminding us that sometimes the most beautiful smiles hide the hardest fights. Christopher Knight as Peter Brady, the reluctant star who felt invisible in the spotlight. Born on November 7, 1957 in New York City, Christopher Knight was thrust into the limelight as the middle brother Peter Brady at the age of 11. He was the endearing, slightly awkward boy whose voice cracked at the wrong moments and who famously uttered pork chops and applesauce in a Humphrey Bogart impression. To the audience, Peter was the relatable underdog, the kid trying to find his personality amidst a house full of loud siblings. He represented the middle child experience with a charm that was both clumsy and lovable. He was the boy next door, the one who made mistakes, so we didn't have to always forgive him with a laugh and a lesson by the end of the episode. However, Christopher Knight carried a secret burden that few fans understood. He hated being Peter Brady. He suffered from a profound imposter syndrome, feeling he was never a true actor like his co-stars, but merely a prop moved around the set. He grew up feeling trapped in a career he didn't choose, yearning for a life of science and logic rather than scripts and makeup. This internal conflict created a deep emotional distance between him and his own childhood. He struggled for decades to shed the skin of the dumb middle brother facing financial strain as the acting roles dried up, forcing him to reinvent himself entirely. His personal life also bore the scars of this instability, marked by a string of failed marriages and public heartbreaks, searching for a genuine connection that fame had made elusive. He was a man fighting to be seen for his mind, not just his nostalgic face. Now, at the age of 68 in late 2025, Christopher Knight stands as the most surprising success story of the bunch. He walked away from Hollywood's expectations to become a successful tech entrepreneur, building a fortune far greater than acting ever provided. He reclaimed his dignity by proving he was more than a sitcom punchline. While he eventually made peace with Peter Brady, appearing in reunions with a wry smile, his true legacy is one of reinvention. He teaches us that if the role the world gives you doesn't fit, you have the power to write your own script. Plumb as Jan Brady, the middle child who fought a lifetime to break the mirror. Born on April 29, 1958 in Burbank, California. Plumb was a child of the industry before she was a child of the world. Casting as the bespectacled middle sister Jan Brady at the age of 11, she became the poster child for teenage angst and insecurity. While Marcia was the beauty and Cindy was the cutie, Jan was the raw nerve, the one who felt invisible, the one who cried out in frustration. Her iconic lament of Marcia, Marcia, Marcia wasn't just a line. It was the anthem for every person who has ever felt second best. She captured the painful awkwardness of growing up with a realism that stung. On screen, she was the ugly duckling, waiting for her moment, a character so relatable that she became the emotional pivot point for millions of viewers who felt they didn't quite fit in. Yet for Plumb, the role of Jan became a stifling iron cage. Unlike her co-stars who embraced the nostalgia, fought a quiet war against the caricature she had created. Imagine the psychological toll of being permanently branded as the neurotic, jealous sister by the entire world. She desperately wanted to be taken seriously as a dramatic actress, taking on dark, gritty roles like a teenage prostitute in Dawn Portrait of a Teenage Runaway, just to shatter the wholesome image that suffocated her. She was the first to refuse reunions, earning her a reputation as difficult, when in reality she was simply a woman fighting for her artistic soul. She lived with the constant nagging fear that her talent would never be seen past the blonde wig and glasses. Her struggle wasn't with drugs or alcohol, but with a profound identity crisis, the deep despair of an artist whose face belongs to the public, but whose heart remains misunderstood. She spent decades running from Jan only to realize the shadow was sewn to her heels. Today, on November 25th, 2025, Eve Plumb is 67 years old. She has finally found her sanctuary not on a soundstage, but in front of a canvas. She reinvented herself as a successful painter, creating works of moody beauty that speak the words she never could on screen. She lives a life of quiet discipline and privacy, largely detached from the Hollywood circus. She is the survivor who didn't crash but simply walked away to build a room of her own. Her legacy is one of defiance and dignity. She taught us that if the world tries to paint you into a corner, you pick up the brush and paint a new door. The final frame freezes on those 9 smiling squares, a perfect grid of a perfect family. That was the story they told us, and we believed it because we wanted to. But life doesn't fit in a neat little box. The father we trusted carried a silent, heavy secret. The mother we all loved has since left us. And the children bore the impossible burden of growing up as an American ideal. The AstroTurf yard is gone, and the family we knew is scattered now, fractured by time and real-world sorrow. But the warmth they gave us, that feeling that everything could be solved with a family meeting, that's the part that truly remains.